This is Pokalai Nui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. Some of you may be actually seeing this program on television. We are not simulcasting the program, so this would be after the 15th of September. And that is today's date in which we are recording this program. If it does play, it will play on one of the Olelo channels, or it will play on YouTube. And if you went to YouTube and just search for it on, looking for my name, Poka Lainui, you could also find it on Hawaiian Perspectives as key words to get into. We are on Google.com, and right now I forget the whole title in which you would input in the computer to get into these programs. We are quite up to date, about a week back in terms of actually loading our programs. So in the event you would like to hear some of the earlier programs, you could get on the YouTube. We are also broadcasting on Olelo Television, but those programs are somewhat delayed because it takes a period of delay to take the tapes down and actually have them put it up on their schedule. All right, today is, as I said before, the 15th of September. It is Saturday, and the time now is 10 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock. We are broadcasting from the top of the Chinese Cultural Plaza as we review national and international affairs, especially with what is happening or what has happened with the Democratic National Convention's closure and what it has left behind. Johann Galtung, who is the father of peace studies, writes an article for an organization known as Transcend. And following the Democratic National Convention, it appears that he was at the convention on September the 5th. And he writes, the Democratic National Convention, or the DNC, floated into oblivion with no debate, Soviet style, hallelujah, amen, with no mention of overt wars with the 5 to 6 Muslim countries, of covert wars by drones and SEALs, U.S. Navy sea, air, and land teams, with many others, and the war on terror. Like the Republican National Convention, RNC squeezing out Ron Paul, who argued for no bases, no wars, no support to Israel. Nor was the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, visible. It took centuries for the Western civilization to hammer out those crucial pillars: no punishment without sentence, no sentence without law, and it's not retroactive, and proof: no detention without hearing, habeas corpus. And it took the stroke of an Obama pen on a New Year's Eve to destroy all of that, with the NDAA in the USA. Down went any moral authority the USA might have had when preaching to selected countries, selected human rights with a loud voice. The whisper all over, USA, watch yourself. Why whispering? Because they are afraid. The negation of the rule of law domestically comes with extrajudicial execution globally, in any country, and also in countries allied with the U.S. The U.S. can strike with drones or SEALs and more, killing their chosen enemies, not by old-fashioned wars fading out between states, but within, down to individuals. Osama bin Laden was the most famous one to be executed without proof, like the wars on Afghanistan, Iraq, and possibly Iran. To take human life is a privilege of God and kings. Gratia Dei. Now handed over to the state. So the, quote, God-given potential of Americans came back to the Democratic Party's platform through dubious Soviet-style voting. Maybe some others would like also to realize that potential, executing a little. Violence is not the way. If a clock irritates, showing the wrong time, one way is to fetch a hammer and give it a killing blow. How to approach it more wisely? Find out why. Try a reset. So also for countries that are irritating, uppity, find out what they want, what you yourself want. Reset the relation. Here are some ticking clocks. How to approach Syria, a multi-nation country run by a minority Alawite Shia dictatorship that is supported by Russia, China, Iran, threatened by a majority Sunni dictatorship supported by the USA, Israel, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and many Syrians. How about a federation with autonomy for each nation, including the Kurds, and democracy in each autonomy? A federal board for foreign security, finance, policy, with all nations on board. How to approach a Kurdish issue, a nation of more than 25 million split between Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria? How about human rights, recognizing Kurdish identity in all four autonomy in parts with Kurdish majorities, and a confederation of those autonomies, a Kurdistan without moving any border, with parliament and executive power for Kurdish issues, as such agreed upon with the four. How to approach Iran, a country badly wounded by the 1953 CIA MI6 deposing an elected prime minister. How about USA, UK publicly wishing that undone, opening for cooperation on green energy versus oil export and import, exploring a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East? How to approach Afghanistan? How about a coalition government with Taliban? Afghanistan as a federation like Switzerland, with much power to local communities. A Central Asian community of Afghanistan, with Muslim neighbors lifting the 1893 Durand Line. A basic needs-orientated policy benefiting all nations and both genders equally. A neutral Afghanistan with no foreign bases but with peacekeeping forces from Muslim countries, also preventing attacks on other countries. How to approach Israel. Difficult, not knowing what Israel wants. With God on the Democratic Party's platform came Jerusalem. That spells Christian Zionism, bent on speeding up the second coming of Christ. And Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates will speed up Armageddon. How about a Middle East community along 1967 borders with the 5 Arab neighbors? USA and Israel came into being, claiming a divine mandate to occupy somebody else's land. Maybe they will also fade out with that idea. Not necessarily. The U.S. used to have one enemy in the Middle East and one in Latin America. Today they have hardly one friend. The United States of Latin America and the Caribbean is coming quickly, demanding a solution to Malvinas Falklands. How about with Argentinian flag and garrison? The rest as before, like Hong Kong. Normalizing relations with Cuba, legalizing some drugs, and an end to the flow of arms and interventions by the USA. A wise U.S. policy would welcome emancipation in the same way that the founding fathers did to London in 1776, 1787, but doing better than George III. Use the Organization of American States, the OAS, as a dialogue forum between the two Americas. One example would be public health, verifying why poor Cuba does better than rich USA in Washington, D.C. Another example, Mex-US Can, a wonderful North American region bridging the North-South gap like a Middle East community for Israel as a landing platform. Take China for mutual learning. How about a public dialogue on imbalances between finance and real economy, so devastating for the USA? Watching the DNC, one is hard-pressed to find any hint that 15.3% in the USA live in poverty, 17.5% in North Carolina alone. That the bottom 90% have not benefited from the growth since the 1970s. The top 10, 1 and 0.1% have. China lifted up the bottom 400 million inhabitants by feeding the economy with domestic demands. In the USA, the bottom is sinking. 14.9% of U.S. households suffering hunger and increasing. The deficit is $16.4 trillion and counting. Not a word about derivatives, hedge funds, credit swaps, speculations, or how the financial industry has turned into a criminogenic culture. Not a trace of the very dynamic Occupy movement. Only a middle-class focus, as if those 15% at the bottom and the poisonous, greedy top did not exist. Money is being printed like mad, and the new debt ceiling is nigh. All these problems can be solved, not by smashing the clocks, but by asking the parties concerned what their goals are, by identifying the legitimate goals using law, human rights, and basic needs. By bridging the gaps, Americans are creative. How about also in global affairs? Hopefully, in the coming 2 months, 2 Soviet-style conventions will add up to vibrant transparency and to create dialogue to democracy. Okay. This was an article, a piece written by Johan Galtung, Professor of Peace Studies and Rector of the Transcend Peace University. If you would like to actually read the article, you could go to his website. It's Transcend, Transcend, transcend.org, and you can get to Johan's website. He has quite a number of writers, many international personalities are associated with Transcend, his Transcend organization. Okay, if you have any questions or any comments, our telephone number here is 524-1080. And since we sort of began with the story of the international arena, or at least how the Democrat and the Republican convention failed miserably to address the international arena, let us continue our discussion with international affairs. And if you would like to comment on any of these matters, again, our telephone number is 524-1080. 1080. So we come to this question: what is happening in the Middle East? The anger against the United States or at the United States has been escalating, not only in Libya but in many of the Islamic countries. And the response by the U.S. Public officials is, why are they turning against us? We have treated them so well. We brought to them democracy. We brought to them much of their weapons. We brought to them money. Why are they treating us so badly? And I think, first of all, we have to say that you cannot conclude that it is everyone in these countries which have participated in the killing of these American political types or in any of these activities. They may be the vanguard or just a few people expressing themselves. So sometimes it's very difficult to attribute certain feelings or certain conclusions for a whole society. And so all you can really do is one of our listeners didn't like my choice of this term, ruminate, but it does call for just to ponder, not necessarily chewing the cod, to ponder on these things or to meditate on these things. So what are the reasons for these actions being taken? Well, I think it's very clear that those who are taking the action are taking it for a very central reason. They hate the United States of America. And I cannot say that it is without good reason. The United States makes a pretense of supporting this concept of democracy. However, it is only a democracy that they will have leaders who are in support of the American position. When it comes to a democratic process ending up with electing those people who do not see eye to eye with the United States is very quick to participate in the overthrow of these folks. Also, the action of the United States in the past 10 years has not been for necessarily good reason. They use the claim that this is to bring about or assist in the bringing about of democracy, and so they want to, quote, impose their democracy on these other people. But oftentimes it's what we call in Hawaii a shibai. The real motivating factor is certainly not for democracy, but for the American national interest. But what is the American national interest? It's a very general term, and usually the American national interest is the American oil company interest or the American capitalist interest, not necessarily for the majority of the Americans, not necessarily for the what we call the 99%, but it is generally in the interest of the very highly or the very high income, the one already getting away with not paying taxes or being able to hide their taxes in the Cayman Islands or in other places. It is, in essence, the Mitt Romneys, and that's why you have the kickback in the political scene in the United States at the present time, with so many heavy rollers investing in the Romney campaign. All right, so those are my views with regards to the anger at the United States, and we see the escalation occurring in the Middle East, and I think it's a brewing anger, especially when you see the United States not only claim that they are the appointed people or special people and they are exempt from the general rules of law, but also taking action in which they cannot be touched. So when they send in, as Galtung says, a SEAL team to kill people, when they send their flights of drones over into other countries, there's no legal basis, no legal authority for that kind of action. But the United States, being an exceptionalist country, or at least applying that term to themselves, claiming that they are an exceptionalist country, that they can do whatever they want and not follow the rules. Oftentimes the rules that the United States try to apply to other countries and talk about other countries and appropriate behavior in other countries, they themselves do not participate in abiding by those rules. For example, the law with regards to invading an independent nation, overthrowing, committing, what do you call it? Regime change in other countries, starting with us here in Hawaii back in 1893, and all the way up for the last 115 years, continuously. More recently and more obviously was the attack by the United States in Iraq. And we can also see the attack in Afghanistan and the participation in the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, and now the rattling of sabers to get into Syria and overthrow that government. The United States has violated and continually violates international principles on the basis that they are supposed to be the exceptionalist country. They walk in and out of Central and South America under their so-called Monroe Doctrine. And what exactly is the Monroe Doctrine? It's a doctrine that says the United States is exempt from international law, that they have the right to walk into these regions because they are themselves in this region. Very similar to the claim that was once made by Japan, Asian or Asia for the Asians. What they really meant was Asia for the Japanese Asians. The United States is no better than that, saying that the Central, South, and North America is for the United States under what they call the Monroe Doctrine. And they have taken the Monroe Doctrine and have intended on applying it throughout the world under the idea that we are a chosen people, that is our manifest destiny, manifested by God, and therefore it's unquestionable. And then violate all these laws with killing people, with violating human rights, and have the audacity to go about the world preaching to others about the concern for human rights and fundamental freedoms. So the hypocrisy, in my view, has just built up to a point where the Muslim countries are saying enough is enough. End of that. And then with the insult of videos and other things, casting, what was the word for it? Aspersions upon their holy folks, that just built up this action or this anger, and the anger was expressed in this way. I don't think it'll end. What do you think?
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'aku me ke oni o ka kuhi hewa. lava mai